Hello everyone and welcome, or in some cases welcome back. This is another in the 10-minute tip series of recorded programs for business-to-business credit professionals. This one is titled Myths and Facts About Business-to-Business Debt Collection. My name is Michael Dennis. Let's go ahead and jump in. Introduction. There are a large number of myths and misconceptions about the work that we do in the credit and collection function. I'm not sure how these misconceptions came to be, but the goal of today's program is to clarify and correct some of the more common myths relating to collection-related activities. Here's a common myth. The myth is this: if you use dunning notices, you shouldn't also be calling your customers to inquire about the status of payment. The reality is that dunning notices alone are unlikely to produce the desired collection results. Therefore, you have no alternative but to call as well as send written notices to customers inquiring about the status of payment. Myth: salespeople can contribute nothing positive to your collection efforts. The reality is very different. Salespeople sometimes can bring additional pressure to bear on the customer to get the customer to contact you and negotiate in good faith to address and resolve a past due balance. Collection myths continued. Myth: it's good manners and good business practice to allow a several-day grace period after an account becomes past due before we reach out to the past due customer to inquire about the status of payment. And not surprisingly, reality is very different. In reality, grace periods are unnecessary, and there's nothing inappropriate or rude or confrontational about contacting a customer to inquire about the status of a past due balance as soon as possible after the account becomes past due. Myth: the larger the account, the larger the AR balance, the more experienced the collector should be. And the reality tells us this: routine collection calls can be handled with anyone with appropriate levels of training. That means that your best and brightest, meaning your most experienced and your most skilled collectors, can be put to work on the customers that represent the biggest challenges, not the customers that have the biggest accounts receivable balances. Myth: all third-party commercial collection agencies are created equal. Reality: no. Collection fees and services and overall effectiveness and efficiency vary widely from one third-party collection agency to another. Myth: in America, companies have the same rights as consumers as it relates to interactions with business-to-business collectors. The reality is very different. It's untrue that they have the same rights as consumers. For example, the FDCPA does not cover the activities of collectors working directly for a creditor company, the seller. Myth: if a customer is making partial payments, irrespective of how large or how small those partial payments are, you cannot place that company for collection with a third-party commercial collection agency, and you can't sue them. The reality is exactly the opposite. The creditor company can place a delinquent customer for collection with a third party when they decide to do so, and they can do the same thing in connection with filing a lawsuit. Just because a customer is making partial payments doesn't exempt them from being placed for collection or sued. Myths continued. Creditors must respond to written proposals or verbal proposals received from customers relating to payment extensions or payment moratoriums. And if in fact the creditor company does not respond, or if the customer gives a deadline for response and the creditor company does not respond by that deadline, then failing to respond can legally be deemed to be an acceptance of the customer's extended payment proposal. The reality is very different. Silence does not mean assent. Silence does not mean acceptance of the customer's proposal. Even if the customer tells you that if you don't respond, you've accepted, Even if they say that in writing, it doesn't matter. The fact that you failed to respond within their timeline or deadline does not mean that you've accepted their proposal. Myth: you must give notice to a customer if you plan to place the customer for collection or you plan to place the customer in the hands of an attorney to file a lawsuit. The reality is that unless you have some contractual agreement with the customer that states that you must give them advance notice of your decision to sue or your decision to place them for a third party, then you have no such obligation to provide advance notification to customers of these types of decisions. Having said that, in the context of deciding whether or not to place an account with a third-party collection agency or arranging for a lawsuit to be filed, it's probably a good idea to consider sending a final notice, a final demand letter to the customer, giving them one last opportunity to do the right thing before they're placed for collection or before you initiate a lawsuit. Myths: it's against the law to call delinquent customers more than once a day. There is no such law. In reality, you cannot call continuously or so frequently that the calls become harassment. But creditors can definitely call more than once a day. I routinely do this in my collection effort. For example, I might call first thing in the morning and leave a voicemail message indicating that I will be calling them later that morning to discuss the status of payment. And let's just carry that a little bit further. Let's assume that I call later that morning and I get their voicemail again. Well, I have a choice then. I can leave another voicemail message, which is a second call. Or I can call back. That would be the third call, and speak to the person I was trying to speak to's supervisor or manager. Or I could speak to the CFO or the VP of Finance or the company president. I definitely am not limited to making one phone call a day. Myth: calling customers to inquire about the status of a past due balance is an insult to the customer. In reality, no, it's absolutely routine. It's something that business-to-business creditor companies do tens of thousands of times each and every single day across your state and across the country. They inquire about the status of past due balances, and sometimes they use the phone to do that. Myth: calling customers should be the creditor company's last resort. No, in reality, calling customers is not a last resort. It's routine. It's common. It's simple. It's easy. It's fast. It's efficient. And these are all reasons why we reach out to customers to inquire about the status of payment by phone. Myth: all third-party collection agencies are about the same. No, in reality, they're not. For example, some only write to customers. Some only call customers to inquire about the status of payment. Some of them call and write customers. Some of them visit customers, or call, or write, or all three. Some of them only work on domestic customers, on past due balances involving customers located in the country in which they are domiciled. Sometimes third-party collection agencies will do domestic and international sales. Some third-party collection agencies work on a contingency fee basis, meaning if they don't collect, you don't pay them, and some don't. Some are more effective than others. Some are easier to work with than others. In other words, all third-party commercial collection agencies are definitely not all the same. Myth: we're going to lose customers if we assertively and professionally follow up with them and require them to pay past due balances sooner rather than later. The reality is, while it's in theory possible that you'll lose customers because you have a professional and assertive collection process, the reality is that it is an unexpected and unusual circumstance where the creditor company's credit department doing their jobs results in the loss of a customer. Myth: if we're doing business internationally, and one of our foreign customers defaults on payment, there's almost no chance that we're going to be able to collect that money from them. Reality: it'll probably be more difficult to try to collect money from a foreign customer that has defaulted on payment, but the chances are not zero, and your chances improve significantly if you engage professionals in the country in which the customer operates to work on your behalf to collect the past due balance. Well, thank you. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. I do hope that you found this presentation to be interesting and informative. This is an excerpt from a 30-minute on-demand program on the same topic. If you're interested in hearing that on-demand program, please contact my sponsor, Business Credit Management Association. And with that, other than be safe and have a great day, thank you for your time.